Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Doug. I'm a wildlife photographer from Gilroy, California. In this video, I'm going to share the results of a whole bunch of experiments I've done over the last 4 months, all of which surround this lens right here. This is my new Canon EF 400mm prime f4.0 IS2 DO. DO stands for diffractive optics, and with that technology, Canon was able to build a lens that's a little bit lighter and a little bit shorter than your average run-of-the-mill 400 f4. In fact, it's so short and so light, it's even lighter and shorter than my favorite lens of all time. This is my Canon EF 300mm prime f2.8 IS2L. A very, very sharp lens, handles teleconverters great. I used this throughout my last eagle nesting season. I've had it for over a year. I love the lens. The only problem with it, it's a little bit short at 300 millimeters. And it gets a little bit heavy. At 300 millimeters is not enough for bird photography, so I typically have to put this on, and this is the Canon EF Mark III 2X teleconverter. It doubles the focal length, which is awesome. It gives me a 600 f5 with the R5 on it, which is great, but it's heavy. It's over 8 pounds with that setup. And for this old guy, it's really too much for me to hand hold for more than 20, 30 seconds or so. So I struggle. I can put it on a monopod and it does better, but I can't go for really long hikes with it. On the other side of the coin, we have this new 400 DO. It's lighter, it's shorter. I can handhold this one, no problem. I usually don't need teleconverters, or at the most a 1.4 teleconverter. It's under 7 pounds with the R7 on this one. And with the R7, with its 1.6 crop factor, that's a 640 millimeter f4. Remember, the aperture is not affected by crop factor, only by teleconverters. So 640 f4, how cool is that? So I was very anxious to see the results of these experiments using that focal length in the R7. And by the way, we will be shooting out the R5 and the R7 in this video. In addition to these lenses, I'll also be adding in the very affordable Canon RF 100-400 and maybe the 100-500 RF lens, which is a very sharp L lens as well. I might save that for its own video, though. I know a lot of people are really interested in that lens. But anyway, that's the story. Which lens is going to be sharper? One of them I'm going to sell, one of them I'm going to keep. What's the bokeh like? How's the focus speed? Are they able to focus on a distant subject really fast? I have a little experiment set up for that. So we're going to learn a lot about this lens. Let's get to the next section where I will talk about the experimental setup. All right, guys, let's quickly talk about the experimental setup. I'm not going to go crazy on this. With regard to stability, both of these lenses and all lenses used in the experiments were put on a tripod gimbal head setup, a very expensive tripod gimbal head setup with a max weight rating of over 50 pounds. So this is like nothing for that. Everything was perfectly balanced. So stability is not an issue. With regard to exposure triangle, I wanted to keep this a real-world experiment, so shutter speed was held constant at 1/1250th of a second for almost all the experiments. The aperture was always shot wide open, and then another sub-experiment shot with it stopped down 1, and then another with it stopped down 2. The ISO was the controlling factor of the exposure triangle, or balancing the exposure triangle, and that was set in accord with the light meter and the histogram. They had to agree, and I did very good at keeping the exposure perfect on all these images. Therefore, very, very little processing was used in any of these. Almost all of the experiments were done with completely raw images. With regard to the file size, I shot everything in full RAW, not even C-RAW. I used an SD card with a 250 megabit read and write speed. I did not use the CF Express card that the R5 has because some of the experiments pit the R5 against the R7, and I didn't want to have that be an advantage for the R5. With regard to pushing down the button and pulling the trigger, I did several sub-experiments to find what was the best way to do it. I used the 10-second delay timer, took 5 shots at each experiment, compared that with just holding the shutter button down and taking a blast of 20 or 30 images in my normal shooting mode, which is high-speed continuous plus, electronic first curtain. Found no difference between those two techniques. And because most of these experiments were done at sunup, where the sun comes up very fast and the light changes very fast, I opted for just pushing down the shutter button so I could quickly get through the experiment without too much light change. But again, I found no difference between, with these all sitting birds or sitting test charts, I found no difference between anything in that regard. And I think that's all I needed to say. As I mentioned in the opening, the main cameras in these experiments were the Canon EOS R7 and EOS R5. The R5 is my main camera, so most of the experiments were done with that. With regard to the lens setup, real-world experiment, I wanted the lens stabilization to be on because that's the way I shot. Apparently there's some technology that senses when these are on a tripod and automatically turns that off. I don't know if I really believe that because I can usually tell when it's off. So I left it on, and I did sub-experiments with it off and on, and I can see no difference. With regard to the lens stabilizing mode, it was mode 1, which stabilized in vertical and horizontal. And I think that's about all I needed to say with regard to the setup. Let's now go talk about how I get these beautiful looking pictures side by side in perfect proportion. So let's talk about Lightroom and Photoshop. All right, guys, real quick, Photoshop and Lightroom setup. So I'd go out and shoot an experiment. I'd usually have a couple thousand images. I'd come back home. Everything was shot in RAW, remember. I'd dump it in my external hard drive, drag it into Lightroom, and then start going through each experiment one by one and finding the sharpest image. So for example, let's say a very common shootout was the 400DO versus the 300L, both wide open. So I'd go through all of those images with the 400DO, and I'd find the sharpest one. I'd export that as a JPEG into its own sharpest of photos, and then I'd go to the next sub-experiment, which was the 400DO, stop down to 5.6. Find the sharpest one, export it. And I did that for all the lens teleconverter camera combinations. So everything was nice and neat and organized. And when I was ready to do experiments, it's so easy for me just to go grab the best image from each experiment. When I was ready to do the actual experiments, I opened up Photoshop and I dragged in the two competing images. For an example, let's use our 400DO wide open versus the 300L wide open. So I dragged both of those best of images in, and I tended to work with the smaller one first. So I like to start by working with the 300L, which has a smaller resolution. Therefore, the sizes of the picture are smaller. And so I would crop it. I would make a note of where the crop points were, cropped it just the way I wanted, usually really tight crops, and save it. Now, to make room for the competing image, I had to expand the canvas by 100%. Then I would go to the bigger image. I would crop that exactly the same and drag it into that space I created for it. And now we have a problem. We have a smaller image and a larger image. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't mess up any of the sharpness of the image by downsizing. So first experiment, I just left the images the same, small versus big, noted the sharpness of the image, and then I dragged the bigger image down. I resized it using Control-T, Command-T on a Mac, so they're exactly the same, and I compared those three experiments. I could find no difference, guys, in doing that. I even tried another method where I turned the bigger image into a smart object, which puts a little protective case around the outside of your image so it doesn't lose pixels. Scaled it down, no difference between any of the images. Just for triple checking, I ran the experiment the opposite way, where I used the bigger resolution image first, which would be the 400DO, cropped it, expanded the canvas, then went to the smaller image, cropped it, dragged it into the new space provided. Now we have a smaller image and a bigger image, so I had to resize the smaller image to big. I went through the same procedure. Guys, I could find no difference no matter what I did. The image quality was unchanged in the resized image. So rest assured that resizing did not affect anything. After I did that, I simply labeled the pictures with the metadata so I could turn that on and off, and that's it. So that's where these beautiful side-by-side images came from. If any further questions, just leave them down below, and I'll get those questions answered. Let's go to the actual experiment at this point. All right, guys, let's get going. Here's the first experiment. So I'm typically going to show you what the scene looks like without any cropping, because it's very important how big the bird is in the frame. Like this bird right here is close to maybe 20%. It fills the frame by about 20%. I should be able to get very good images, even though it's low light. So I think it's important for you to know that. We can get a general look at the bokeh. This is with the 400 DO, no teleconverters, wide open, 7:40 in the morning, February 11th, 2024. So that's what the scene looks like. Let's crop in now and show you the competitors of this image. So one of these is the 400 DO wide open. One of these is the 300L with a 1.4 teleconverter. So that'll bring it up to 420 millimeters. These are all shot with the R5. If I forget to say R5, just assume it's the R5. In fact, you can see R5 right up there. One of these is the very affordable RF 100 to 400 shot at 400 millimeters. And that's at f8. And I think we can immediately see who that one is without even going any further. But I will kind of do my thing here. Let's blow it up and blow it up a little bit more. And we can look at the bokeh here as well. So immediately, guys, can you pick out the f8 100 to 400? That's a 600, between $600 and $650 lens. Yeah, it's this one, obviously, right? The bokeh is not very good looking behind. It even got the advantage of having a little extra sunlight, but the bokeh is terrible. You can see the owl behind it. I mean, it's okay if you're not a professional. This is a fine. It's a sharp lens, but it doesn't compare to these two. So one of these is the 400 DO, one's the 300L. Let's go look and see which one that is. So let's go back. Let's blow these up. I think that's about as big as I can get it. So let's just do a general comparison. I'll let you look at it here, and then I'll take you through my process. All right, here's my thoughts on this image. So it looks pretty good from this distance. I think this one had a touch more sunlight. The sun comes up very, very fast when you're doing these right before sunrise, but the birds look about the same. So I look at the sharpness on the edges of the bird, around the perimeter of the bird, or the periphery of the bird, whatever you want to say. And at first glance, they both look pretty good. I can see individual hairs there on both of these. So great, pretty happy with these. Now let's look at the front of the bird. I can see good feather definition, or hair definition in this case. Without pixel peeping, I can't see much more. They look really similar. There's always this wild hair that sticks out of this black and white and brown owl, so that's always a good one to look at for sharpness, and it looks pretty good in both of these. Eyes look pretty clear, so really, very, very, very close. Can't really tell. Let's now go in and pixel peep and do that same algorithm here. That's probably enough. Okay, looks sharp there. Looks sharp there on the lateral parts of the bird, or the outside of the bird, around the periphery. This little tuft is located maybe an inch behind the bird, so that's a little blurry there. I'll just make note of that. There's the wild hair, looks good. Now with that in mind, let's go jump over and look at this one. Let's look at this little tuft. Definitely sharper here. The edge still looks good. The front looks good. Now look at the front on this one. So that's not super sharp through there. Let's actually bring this one closer and compare those parts of the chest. And to me, that looks a little bit better. But when you go to the periphery of the bird, we got that. It's definitely not as sharp as that. So it's kind of a split decision on this one. And we're going to see this theme over and over again, where some of the periphery is just not quite as sharp in the 400 DO. Let's look at the little bottoms here. So that's not super sharp. Definitely sharper here. It's still a little off here, but I mean, very, very close. I'd be happy with any one of these. Remember, this is not processed at all. You run this through DxO3, do a little processing. These images will be beautiful and professional quality. So one more thing I do like to do, let's zoom in and look at the head a little bit, and then we'll move to the next one. Just look at the eye. This one's facing the sun. You can see the sun hasn't come up yet. We have these nice little white tufts of hair. There's the wild hair there. It's pretty sharp, and they're okay. And let's go jump over here and look at the other one. These are definitely sharper. That little wild hair is better. I think the eye is a little better. So when we crazy pixel peep, we have to give the win, or at least I do. I give the win to the one on the left. What do you think? Let's put them back. You ready for the reveal? And we'll get on to the next one. The reveal is 300L plus a 1.4 teleconverter. And this is the 400 DO wide open. Now I can tell you I don't have time to go through this, but I can tell you if I stop this down to 5.6, it's going to raise the ISO and the graininess, but it will also sharpen this up even more. On the other side of the coin, if I stop this one down, it'll sharpen this a little bit. Sometimes is the caveat there. When there's a lot of light, stopping down works great for both of these lenses. When there is not a lot of light around, the stopping down increased sharpness effect isn't quite as pronounced. But I did do an experiment where I stopped this down and it cleaned this up one quite a bit. All right, but anyway, it is what it is. I bought these lenses to shoot wide open in low light. So we got to give the win here to the 300L, barely. All right, let me be right back. Let's load up experiment number 2. Okay, here's the next experiment. So this time we have the sun just creeping up. You can see some nice sunlight here. Here's the 400 DO. We're at 7:40 a.m. and this is the scene non-cropped. So we're probably a rule of thirds grid. Each one of the quadrants is about 11%. So I'd say we're probably between 10 and 15% with regard to bird in the frame. That's still plenty of bird in the frame. It should be very sharp. So I'm expecting that. Let's go see what the competitors look like with some bokeh behind them. Actually in front of them this time. The little owl's in front and this one's behind. One of these is the 400 DO wide open, and one of these is the 300L with a 1.4 teleconverter, just like before, just a little bit smaller in the frame and with a little bit better light on the birds. And just note there is no processing done. These are raw images that look so good. All right, let's zoom in now and take a close look and see what we can see. Let me set that up real quick. Could probably blow it up a little bit. All right, I'll give you a second to look at these. And now my comments. So really, really pretty looking. You can see nice detail kind of far back like this. We can see nice detail in the chest here. Nice detail here. Maybe we'll zoom in and see, but maybe not quite as nice. Periphery looks really, really sharp all the way here. All the way here, including that little hard to get spot. The DO has trouble with that. And again, I can pretty much tell you which one this is already just by looking at the periphery. It's not quite as sharp, and we're going to check that out by pixel peeping, but I already know which one is which. You can look at the wild hair, looks pretty sharp in both. Let's zoom in and pixel peep now, even though I already know the winner. So let's look at this area. Here's the lateral part of the bird, or the outside, perimeter, periphery, whatever you want to call it. Pretty darn sharp there. It's really popping. Let's jump over here to the right image or left image. Yeah, that's not great. Okay, so definitely we've lost some. And this problem with the DO and the periphery seems to be magnified as the light gets better and better. So, but then let's go to the front of the bird. Check that out. Let's scooch these together a little bit. And really, really sharp. Okay, it's close. But I think that this one wins with regard to the front of the bird. It's very close. See down here, a little soft down here. Looks a little sharper to me. Let's check the other periphery of the bird. And that's not very good, is it? It's in the shade a little bit. And there's that tough little tuft of hair that the DO always has trouble with. Much sharper there. Pull the faces together just so I can show you these. I already know the result. Looks sharper. This eye looks sharper than this one. These tufts of hair, I can see some detail, but they're much sharper over here. So even if we go up here, I mean, that looks sharper than this to me. So an easy win for one of these. Which one do you think, guys? I'll give you a second to, before I do the reveal. Okay, here comes the reveal. I'm predicting the DO is over there. And it is. So that's the 400 DO. And wide open both of these are. Now, remember I said that I can make this a little better by stopping down? Let's go look at this one real quickly. Can blow that up a little bit. Okay. So same experiment, but now instead of the DO being wide open, we're shooting one full stop down. So the 400 DO, 400 millimeters at f5.6, still wide open with the 300L. So we're at f2.8. I don't think I stopped that. Oh no, we have the teleconverter. Remember, teleconverter will automatically stop you down. So we're at f4 versus f5.6. And let's redo this. Let's check the kind of the long distance view. Can't tell now. Well, maybe still a little soft here, but definitely improved over last time. And let's just go right to pixel peeping. And there's this has got to be the 300, right? That's nice and sharp. And, well, is that the 300? Maybe I switch sides, because this looks a little more grainy, like higher ISO. Like when you stop down, you're going to add some ISO or some graininess problems. It looks really sharp, though. The center front of the bird looks amazingly sharp. I don't think we've seen one like this. That looks sharp, that little hard to get tuft. There's the wild hair up there. That looks good. And now let's go over to this one. That looks sharp too. Maybe not quite as sharp. The tuft looks sharp, but not quite as sharp. Okay, I'm kind of stumped on this one. There's the wild hair, looks good. That doesn't look quite as good there, that eye, compared to that eye. All right, let's do the reveal, because we got a lot of stuff to go through. And I'll give you a second to make your decisions. Let's add the... Nope, so this was the 400 DO. So that cleaned up quite nicely. Right, it was quite blurry before, so it cleaned up very nicely, I think. And yeah, so stopping down does help. But I don't want to stop down, right? I bought this for an f4 aperture lens so I can shoot in low light. So, all right, I'll see you in the next experiment. Let's go on to experiment 3. All right, guys, welcome to experiment 3, another low light experiment. Now we've done 2 experiments with the R5. It's time to bring the R7 in here. And here is what the 400 DO looks like. 845. We do have some high clouds right now, which is keeping the ISOs up a little bit higher than normal. Here's what the scene looks like non-cropped. We have this little cool little eagle owl, I think it's called. It's got this little tag so we can see what the periphery really looks like with regard to sharpness. It's got this spiked hair. So, all right, let's see what the bokeh looks like with our 2 competitors. Oh, actually 3. I got the 100 to 400 at 400 millimeters, that $650 lens in here. And note, let's go back here. Look at the size of the bird in the frame. So that's definitely a rule of thirds. Every quadrant is 11%. So that's definitely 11, maybe 8 to 11%, I would guess. So I'm not going to be expecting quite as great of images with this bird because it's a little bit smaller in the frame. Plus the light is not the greatest. So let's just keep that in mind when we look at these. It's also farther away from us in this experiment, and the lion is closer. So the bokeh difference isn't as much because this is farther away from the front of the camera. So bokeh still looks better here, right, by far. So we can immediately tell which one is the RF 100 to 400, can't we? Yeah, it's definitely this one. The bokeh's not as good. I can see the eye in the owl. I don't want to take the time to go through the 400, 100 to 400, but just real quick, just to, in case you're wondering, it does not look very good, right? So let's not even worry about that one. Let's go to a side-by-side now, and let's just blow them right up. And let's do our same thing. So definitely higher ISOs. We can see there's more grain. Again, these are raw images, no processing at all. And what can we see from this distance? Not really pixel peeping. Well, the spiked hair looks really good in this one. It looks good in both of these, but maybe a little bit better here. We'll see when we pixel peep. So I'm thinking this one, I'm liking this one better. The quality of the eyes, the shininess of the eyes, maybe a smidge better here, but very, very close. I can't really tell the front of the bird. There's just not good fur to look at that. We can look at the periphery of the bird over here, and we can already see a problem. I can in my 4K monitor anyway. I can't even read that word. I can't read any of those small words. And here, it looks like ages 3 and up. I can read that. I can't read that there. So already this is an easy victory for this, whoever it is. And remember, this is the R7 we're working with. Let's go ahead and pixel peep just to confirm our findings. Let's look at the kind of the periphery of the head here. Very high ISO, so lots of grain, but nice and sharp. This will clean up really nice in DxO3, which I prefer over Topaz Labs, by the way. I'm not getting paid to say that, but just real world stuff. Yeah, this doesn't look very good. So I don't think we need to go much further. We can look at the tag. Again, ages 3 and up, really, really difficult. I can't read that word. I know what it is already because this is like my third take through this. That's Indonesia. So easy winner on the right. Let's do the reveal and see who that is. Are you ready? Here we go. So another low light victory, this time with the R7 for the 300L at low light. So this 300, even with the 1.4 teleconverter on, it's close. And I mean, I can process these images and we can make them really, really hard to tell apart. But raw speaking, the 300L, the f2.8 IS2 L lens is looking really good. Let's go to the next experiment. All right, guys, let's do another low light experiment. This time right at sunup, we got a little light hitting the bird. This one is different because we're comparing the R7 versus the R5. So both of these lenses are the 400DO. Now the R7, as you know, has a 1.6 crop factor. So that's going to push the 400DO out to 640 millimeters, and it's not going to affect the aperture. Let me say that again. If you add a crop factor to a lens, it does not affect the aperture. You still let the same amount of light in. So we got a 640 f4, which is one of the reasons I bought this lens. A very light setup, just a smidge under 7 pounds. And I'm really interested in these experiments, seeing what the 640 f4 can do with the R7. This is going to be compared against the R5 400DO, and I did add a 1.4 teleconverter just to bring it up to 560 millimeters. So we have 640 millimeters versus 560 millimeters. Here's what the uncropped version looks like. And this bird is big in the frame to make things easy for us, so I would expect some pretty good images from this. I would say it's, let's see, if we cut this in half, I'd say this would fill up a quarter of the pie about, so it's probably 25% of the frame, so we're expecting good things. Let's go look at the competitors now. So I didn't do a bokeh one on this because I think we know the bokeh will be about the same. Let's just get to the competition, trying to stay under 1 hour. I think we can blow up one more. There we go. So let's compare which one's the Canon EOS R5 versus the Canon EOS R7. Can you tell the difference? The R7 is at 640 millimeters, where the R5 has a teleconverter on there. It's at 560 millimeters. Give you a second to look at it, and let's go through our little program. So we see nice detail here, maybe not as nice as we've seen before, but we can see good separation on that periphery, on this periphery. Yeah, it looks okay. That little troublesome tuft is going to be the same now because the DO has trouble with that in both regards. There's that little wild hair. We can see that. We can see the eyes. So from this, and the chest is looking pretty sharp. So from this vantage point, things are looking pretty good. So let's go pixel peep. And let's see if we can see a difference. So not the greatest in the world, right? We've seen way sharper. So it's just okay. Let's compare that to the other one. Same thing, maybe a little worse here. That's not great looking there. How about over here again? Yeah, this looks a little better to me, but it doesn't look great. Let's check the other side out, the other periphery. There's that little tuft that has trouble. I mean, it's not looking super sharp here. Maybe worse over here, right? That doesn't look good at all. So this one on the left that looks terrible. This one on the left is not doing great. Let's look at the chest of the birds. Remember, the DO seems to do pretty well in the chest. And those are pretty sharp. I see a lot of fur detail there. How about this one? A lot of detail there. I think the thing that really gets me, if we pull these two together, this edge over here just does not look good. Let's compare those just to make sure I'm not seeing things side by side. And I mean, they both don't look great, but this doesn't look great. Might have been a puff of wind blowing. Looks like the hair's kind of puffed up a little bit there. 1/1600th of a second will easily freeze that, so we don't have to worry about that. Yeah, it's just not as sharp down here either. So yeah, the one on the left isn't the greatest. Let's look at the head. There are the eyes while we're here. There's that wild hair. I mean, neither one of them is great. All right, I don't know about you, but I have my answer. Give you a second to think about it. So fairly close, wouldn't you say? It's fairly close. The chest looks good. From this vantage, you can't tell a lot, but when we pixel peep, I don't like the one on the left that much. And that is the R7, unfortunately. The R5 did a little bit better job here, I would say. Okay, let's go to the next experiment. All right, guys, I wanted to show you this experiment. So it's again it's just like the last one. It's the R5 versus the R7 with the DO, the 400 DO. So the R5 had a 1.4 teleconverter to bring it up to 560. The R7, because of the 1.6 crop factor, didn't need that, so it's shooting at 640. So that's all I wanted to say right now, but I want to look at, if I can talk and do this at the same time, I want to look at these two images. So this is just like we saw last time. So one of these is the R5 and one's the R7. R5 is 560, the R7 is 640. And let's see what we can see. Let's start by looking at the periphery of the bird. Let's blow it up if we're going to do that. And that does not look good, right? From beautiful, beautiful, this is 845 light. Very disappointed with that. The bird's not that small in the frame. It should be better. Now let's look at this one. So not great, but a lot better. Okay, let's look at the chest now. Put the two chests side by side. Look at this. This is really bad over here. Just caught my eye. And this morning, before I did this video, I went back to the raw files and I went through every one of these images shot at f4, and every one was like this. I was really thinking I must have done something wrong, but these are all, there's 30 images, more than 30 images, and they all are really soft on the borders. The chest is okay, as usual, right? That's a familiar sound or familiar result with this 400DO. The face doesn't look great. The eyes look okay, but it's just not sharp. Now let's look at this one. Okay, it's looking a lot better, right? The chest looks sharp. Let's see this periphery. So it's okay. This one's okay. But something really went, that looks fine. Something really went wrong with that other one. All right, so let's go back and do the reveal with these two, and then I'll bring that other one in and talk about that. Here's the reveal. Right, so this one that was terrible, that was wide open. That was the R7 that did that. Really bad result, and it was wide open. The R5 with the 1.4 teleconverter, that one looked okay. I mean, that'll clean up nicely. Not super amazingly sharp with that one. But watch what happens if I substitute this one in. So this is also the R7. Might as well tell you right now who it is. This is also the R7, but I stopped this down one full stop. So now let's go take a look and see how much better this is. Right, let's look at this. So this is the same camera, the same everything, only stop down is the only difference. And it's crazy sharp. In fact, it's sharper than the R5, I think. Chest looks great. This area, which was terrible, is now fixed. I mean, look at this white fringe right here compared to this. This easily beats it. So see what I mean about stopping down when there's a lot of light? Now we're really pixel peep. I mean, that looks really good. Look how sharp that is. That's what I would expect. So when more light comes out, this looks great too. When more light comes out, the 400DO definitely benefits from stopping down. And as I said, I went back this morning before I did this because I couldn't believe it. And I just wanted to make sure that I couldn't find at least one wide open image that looked good. I mean, if we compare these two together now, I guess we can do that since this has probably piqued your interest a little. Let's just compare these two just so we can remember. So this is wide open. This is f5.6, stop down. Everything else is the same. It's the R7. I don't even have to go any further down. That's really nice looking. This is terrible looking. And all 30 images look like this. So I can't explain it. If you have any explanation for that, and I looked at the other, I went down to f8 and it still looked nice and sharp, but all the f4 images look like this. So sometimes the f4 works great, most of the time, 98% of the time, but every now and then it just goes a little crazy, and I don't understand why that is. All right, let's go to the next experiment. All right, it's time to do some real birds. So here are one pair of bald eagles I follow. This is the female, and this is the full frame, but it's not really full frame. It's with a 2.0 teleconverter on the 400DO. So this is at 800 millimeters, and we can still see the bird is maybe between 10 and 15% in the frame. So I'm not expecting amazing things at this distance, but nevertheless, that's what we're working with. All right, let's see the competitors now. So one of these, this is the R5. In fact, I don't think I'm going to do any more R7 experiments. Everything's going to be R5. That's my primary camera from here out. So R5, one of these is the 400DO with a 2x teleconverter, so 800 millimeters. The other one is with the 300L with the 2x teleconverter. So the best that we can do with that one is 600 millimeters. So that was f5. The 400DO was going to be at f8. So a little advantage in that regard. So why do these bokehs look about the same? The sticks are about the same blown out. If one of these is f5.6 and one of these is f8, shouldn't the 5.6 have a better bokeh, a more blown out background? And the answer is no, because remember, the other factor that makes bokeh is magnification. So it's only the f5.6 is only at a focal length of 600. The f8 is at 800. So that 200 millimeter focal length will make up for the lost bokeh from the apertures. So that's why the bokehs are the same. Okay, let's blow them up a little more. I think we can go bigger. All right. So beautiful light. I forget what time it was. I think I said that already, but I think it's probably 9, 10 o'clock. Yeah, they both look really good. I mean, I like the pose a lot better here. But from this distance, I mean, I see great feather detail here. Looks like there's great detail in both of these. I like the little better contrast here, a little darker here. I wanted to hit the black slider to the left on this one to kind of darken it up a little bit, but it is what it is. Although that would probably make this area too dark. So yeah, down here we can see a lot of feather detail. Just the way the bird is, we don't see this. The bird's feathers are more tucked up here. So a little disadvantage there. But yeah, they both look about the same, don't they? Let's go pixel peep and see if we can tell any difference. I can scooch them together. Now there's no fuzzy periphery to look at. So that's good for the 400DO, I think. Kind of in the center of the bird we can look. Right through here versus the other center. And I don't know if it's because of the contrast, but this looks really nice to me. So they're very close. Both of these are really, really close. It's hard to pick a winner. Let's go over to this side. Lots of feather detail here. So we're missing feathers here to even look at. I mean, over here it looks like a smidge better detail compared to here. So I like the feather detail better on both of these. So I'm picking the one on the left here. And this is the first kind of long distance experiment we've looked at. So the 300L has been kind of winning these, but we had a pixel peep to show the winning. So let's see what this will do. I'll give you a second to think about it. Ready for the reveal? Wow. Well, the 400DO with the 2x teleconverter, it's very, very close, but it wins. So that 800 millimeters does really, really well here. And it beats the 300L, even with the 2x teleconverter, even the fact that it's at 5.6 versus f8. So good win for the 400DO at long distance with bird small in the frame. But yeah, so happy with that. Let's look at hummingbirds next. All right, hummingbirds. Took me forever to get these shots because hummingbirds are hyperactive, but I finally found a male who kept flying back to the exact same perch in the exact same spot, and I was able to get these shots. One of these is the 400DO wide open. One of these is the 300L wide open with no teleconverter. So this is the first time we've looked at the 300L without a teleconverter. So it's at 2.8, f2.8 versus f4.0. How come the bokeh's the same? Bokeh's about the same, right? Wouldn't 2.8 f number be better than a 4.0? No, because we got 100 millimeters more with the f4, so that cancels the aperture difference. All right, so can I blow that up a little more? Not really. Let's look at this view just to see what we can see from a distance. They both look beautiful, don't they? Look at the eye. You can see the sun reflection in there. Really good feather detail on both of these. The wing, again, looks like we've seen this before, haven't we? Contrast looks a little bit better here than this. Like I want to add a little, but I mean, it is what it is. Colors maybe a little bit brighter on this one. These are both really, really beautiful images. And these came out, when I processed these image, ran through DxO3 and then did a little Lightroom, little Photoshop to them. They came out absolutely professional quality, beautiful images. All right, so I think it's a tie from this distance. Let's go in, which we've seen that quite a few times. Let's maybe scooch them a little bit better. Let's scooch them even more. Let's start by looking at the head and the beak. Okay, really sharp feather detail here around the edge. Sharp around the edge here as well. Maybe lost a little bit in here around the periphery of the bird. I don't know, I might be hallucinating a little bit. Let's look down the front of the bird now. Again, I think there's a little loss of detail on the very, very edge of the bird compared to this. Would you agree? Let's pull it closer even. I mean, I can see feather detail right up to the very edge here. Right here, I can't see that. It's a familiar tune, isn't it? All right, let's look at the wings. And the wings just look really good. These look like they have a little more contrast. I mean, this is a beautiful picture, both of these. This one's not quite as defined, but I mean, they're really good. But to me, the reason this one loses is because it's a little bit soft around the edges. Even if we go down the back, it looks a little soft. So I got a pretty good idea who that is, and I don't see that here. Look at that really sharp detail all the way out to the edge. And we just don't see that here. It's subtle. I'll give you a second here to make your decision. Ready for the reveal? I'm guessing this is the 400DO. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm not. It is the 400DO, and that's the 300L. So, and again, that'll clean up real nicely with DxO3, so you'd be happy with either of these, but it is what it is. Another win for the 300L. Another one. Got another eagle. You want to see that? All right, I'll be right back. All right, the famous Milpitas eagles are here. This is I believe it's the female, the 4-year-old female, but very small in the frame, right? So I'm not expecting great things. Plus, she's in a pine tree, so some of this light is being shielded. It's almost 11 o'clock, so I'm not expecting great things. But let's see what we can do. So let's run our experiment again. And so we're going to have the 400DO with a 1x teleconverter versus the 300L with a 2x teleconverter. That's going to be the experiment. And let's get that full view in the screen like we've been using. And these eagles are not as sharp as the last one. They're more grainy because the ISOs are higher. So let's see if we can pick out the winner. Right, let's look at the periphery. The birds are a little bit different. Looking at the periphery here, got some good feather detail here. I can see it here as well. Good feather detail down here in the center of the bird. See it there as well. Maybe a smidge better over here on the left. Remember the last long distance eagle competition, The 400DO won that one. How about the head? The sharpness of the head looks good on both of these, just a smidge better. I think the eagles may be turned a little more into the sunlight. The eyes a little bit sharper. Let's look at the rest of the body. Let's blow this up a little. And this might just have a little bit more light on it too. It's like I want to bump the exposure just a smidgen on this one, but I'm not going to do that. But look at the feather detail here, even though it's fairly high ISO and long distance. This one just wins for me. But we have to pixel peep to see that winning. All right, let's go do the reveal. I'm guessing this is the 400DO. I might be wrong, and I am wrong. That's the 300L. So 400DO lost this long distance competition. Very small in the frame, and that's the, those two lenses are really, really close, especially when birds are far away like this. So okay, is what it is. So 400DO won one eagle competition, the 300L won the other. Too bad I didn't throw the 2x teleconverter on here like I did before, but I wanted to keep it 600 to 560. All right, let's see. Shall we go to test charts? Is anybody still hanging with me? I think if you're going to purchase this expensive of a lens, I bet a couple of you are still hanging around. So let's look at some test charts. Let's see. Let's go with this classic one. And then maybe we'll do one more and call it a day. So these are both wide open. Actually, no. One's the 400DO and one is the 300L with the 1.4 teleconverter. So f4 versus f4, 400 versus 420. So very similar focal lengths. Let's see what we can see from afar. I mean, this is not really afar, but... So colors look great. I immediately see a little purple blotches all over, a little chromatic aberration, especially in here with this lens. Don't see it in this lens. Don't ever see that on birds. I don't know if it's because of all these colors. I don't know where that comes from. You can see it down here as well, so maybe some of you might not like that. I don't know if that's the 400DO or the 300. With regard to sharpness, we can look at these little lines. I mean, they go all the way down. We can see really great detail. How about off to the periphery of the chart? I mean, from afar, it's hard to see. Let's scooch this one over, because that's been one of the problems with the 400DO. Pretty close, wouldn't you think? Maybe the numbers are just a little bit better here, a little bit clearer. So let's see if that holds back toward the center. Try to get the centers as close as I can. So this would be the center, 400 versus 400, 800. I think these are just a little bit sharper. It's almost like they have a little more contrast to them. But look at the chromatic aberration. Is that what that's called? I never see that in birds. At least the birds I shoot. And that's significant. I mean, some of you may not like that. I don't know how you could get rid of that with Lightroom or Photoshop. It's probably a way, but that might not be so cool. But with regard to sharpness, I think just a little bit by pixel peeping, I think the one on the right is the winner. Ready for the reveal? There's the reveal. And it's the 300L. So again, a little tiny bit sharper. but some chromatic aberration, I believe. Let me know in the comments if that's what that's called, because I don't shoot a lot of test charts. You want to shoot another test chart? Let's do one more. Be right back. All right, let's do a couple Snellen eye charts. We have one with some letters and we have one with some numbers. Let's do this one. It's probably, I mean, we kind of looked at a color chart already. Let's look, and I can tell you the results are the same. I've done this experiment a bunch of times. So let's look at this one, Snellen eye chart with some really small numbers. What do you think? Give you a second here to look at it. Really very close, I would say, wouldn't you? I'm just reading this. I mean, from this distance, it looks really, really close. Kind of some funky, it's not really purple, but is that some more of that very faint chromatic aberration showing up again? I think the numbers are maybe a little bit sharper. Let's go in a little bit closer and look at these smallest numbers. Can pull them right there. Compare them side by side. They're really close, right? The 9 looks good, but I think the 9 is just a little easier to read. The other 4s, this is better. So I don't know. What do you think, guys? Ready for the reveal? I'm betting this is the 300. Yep, it is the 300. But they both have that little... No, this actually looks a little purple there. All right, let's go look at one more experiment. Let's look to see how well the 400DO handles teleconverters. All right, we got the more official Snellen eye chart. This is a pocket one, it's called. And this is the 400DO shot on the R5. But one of these is shot with no teleconverter. One has a 1.4 teleconverter, and the other has a 2.0 teleconverter. So we have F4, F5.6, and F8 respectively. The question is, which one can we tell the difference? How does the 400DO handle teleconverters is the question. And from this distance, I mean, you guys look and see what you think. I mean, they're all pretty darn sharp, aren't they? They're all very sharp. If I had to pick one, I mean, this one probably looks the best. But very, very close. Let's pixel peep a little bit. Go look at the small letters. Maybe that will help. Well, those letters look good. I mean, if we just look at the smallest letters, I don't think I can tell any difference there. If we look at these numbers, that's definitely a little bit better. Maybe a little more contrasty, just a tiny bit sharper. And this is definitely the best one. Yeah, there's no question in my mind now. All right? So, worst, second place, this is the winner. Third place, second place, winner over here. So you would expect, let's go back to the beginning. You would expect them to lose a little bit with teleconverters. So I would guess this is wide open. This is 5.6, and this would be F8 or the 2x teleconverter, 1.4, and no teleconverter. Ready for the reveal? That is exactly what happened. So it handles teleconverters really, really well, but you can, if you pixel peep, you can see a difference. All right, let's go wrap it up. Let's go to the next section. All right, guys, let's wrap things up. Welcome to the conclusion section. We've been through a whole bunch of experiments. Let's conclude. So based on all those experiments, let's talk about sharpness first. These two lenses are both very, very sharp lenses. You'd be happy with either one. But there is a winner here. The 300L is a little bit sharper, with a caveat. It's sharper around the periphery of the bird. We saw that result repeatedly with birds that were fairly large in the frame. If the bird is farther away and we had to use like a 2x teleconverter, very, very difficult, almost impossible to tell the difference. In fact, with a 2x teleconverter at 800 millimeters, this one won one of the competitions, the 2x teleconverter competition, with an eagle about 75 yards away. But for the most part, the 300L won the sharpness category, so I have to give the win there. With regard to bokeh, they both have amazingly beautiful bokeh. It's buttery. It has a certain characteristic to it that I just can't explain. The 100 to 500L lens just can't match the bokeh of either of these lenses, and that is one of the factors why you pay so much money for these lenses. They take amazing pictures. And who wins the bokeh competition? Nobody. They're tied. And that might be confusing because this is a f2.8, which is supposed to have incredible bokeh, and this is a f4, which is a little bit less wide than this one. So in that category, this would have a slight decrease in bokeh. But don't forget the other bokeh factor. It's focal length. 400 millimeters versus 300 millimeters. So that extra 100 millimeters offset the wider aperture of the 300L. So we have a tie. We saw that over and over again. With regard to focus speed, I don't think I actually put this in the experimental section because it was getting too long, but they both focus just fine. I set up a little, and I'll roll some B-roll here as I explain this. I set up a little test course where I had 3 stuffed animals. One was quite small, and I put that in the shade a long ways away, and both of these zipped right onto the targets, no problem. No difference than the RF mount 100 to 500 with those dual autofocus motors. So they both focus really good. There is one little problem that I noticed with the 400DO, and that occurs with a small bird who is in the dark, like of the bushes under a tree, and there's a really bright background, and the lens happens to jump to a background structure with high contrast. It's very difficult to get this one to jump into the dark, so to speak. I really had trouble, and I did miss some little birds because I just couldn't get it to focus. I don't have that problem with the RF 100 to 500. Although it struggles a little bit, I can always get it to jump on the bird after a little coaxing. This one you can't in that type of situation. There are some buttons that have been created for that, where you can hit the button and it will jump to a shorter focal length, so that can be overcome. I'm not really familiar with using them kind of on the fly like that. The 300L also has that problem, but I don't remember it being as severe as that of the 400DO, so just be aware of that. If you do purchase this one, you should probably become familiar how to do a focus preset, and it's really easy to do. Then you hit this button and it just jumps there. But other than that, the focusing speed is fine. With regard to the teleconverter experiments, they both handle teleconverters really, really well, and it's difficult to pick a winner. To pick a winner, you have to pixel peep. If you do pixel peep, as we saw in the test card experiment, there is a very slight decrease in sharpness as you add teleconverters, but it's almost impossible to see. With real birds, really impossible, or I should say almost impossible to see, so that should not be a factor. These handle teleconverters much better than the 100 to 500 RF lens does. Next important experiment was how the 400DO handled the R7, because I was really excited to put an R7 on here, which is light. It's got a 1.6 crop factor, so I basically have a 640 f4 lens. How cool is that? But unfortunately, every single experiment I did, there was a significant loss of sharpness when I stuck the R7 on the 400DO here. And that was a little disappointing to me. In fact, I was so frustrated, I thought, well, maybe it's a fluke. I even repeated yet another experiment over the weekend with a whitetail kite. I'll throw those up right now. And you can see if we zoom in a little bit, it's just not as sharp with the R7 compared to the R5, even with a 1.4 teleconverter on the R5. So I was a little disappointed in the performance there. What about stopping down? Both of these lenses, as I mentioned earlier, they enjoy being stopped down, but there has to be enough light around to see that effect. Right at first sunup, the stopping down doesn't help that much. But once like 8 o'clock light, 9 o'clock a.m. light, they both enjoy being stopped down. So if you have plenty of light and you are close enough to the bird where you're going to have an amazing bokeh anyway, I would definitely stop these down, especially the 400DO, which is a little soft around the edges. Stopping down will clean that up. All right, guys, that'll do it. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Please consider subscribing and liking at least. A lot of hard work goes into these videos. I will see you in the next video.